Alright guys, welcome back into the shop for another video. You can see we got the old work truck in here. We're doing some much needed maintenance on that. It's actually kind of embarrassing. We had a really busy week last week with Orville and the drift car and all that stuff, so I'll put a card somewhere up in here. If you haven't seen anything on that video, go check it out. We kind of rode the struggle bus a little bit, but we installed the Scotty D Racing angle kit on that car, and in today's video what I wanted to do is revisit mechanics trophies, mechanics stories, and we did one of these about a month and a half ago, and you guys seem to really like it. And what it is we just talk about things like the dreaded lug stud that was on the VW. If you remember this at all, I had to weld the sockets on to the lug studs because we didn't have a key. And it's just, that's what this video series is all about, is just talking about little trophies like this that mechanics keep around the shop just to get a laugh once in a while, stuff like that. So I got all my stuff set up. We're gonna set you guys up and then we'll get into this episode. Addicted to you. All of my attention I've been giving to you. All right. We are back for the second episode of Mechanics Trophies, Mechanics Stories, little knick-knack paddywhacks that we keep around the shop just to either give us a laugh or remind us that maybe the repair that we're doing right now isn't so bad. So I got my stuff right here, and the very first thing on my list is going to be fairly recent, and this belongs to my buddy Lucian. I told him I had to keep this. It's actually a piece of his drive belt. So if you've been on the channel for any length of time, you know I'm not a super big fan of European cars. I'm just not. I own one, and yes, they're nice when they work and they're fun toys, and you know, they make a lot of cool stuff, but they're just a hassle and a headache and a money pit when you get into fixing some of these things. And the funny thing was, when Lucian brought me his BMW, it's a 330 Ci coupe, letters and numbers. Anyway, it's a really beautiful car. He's been working really hard on this thing for a really long time. Got the cage in it. He's got some really nice seats, some nice coilovers. A whole bunch of stuff has been done to this car, but he brought it in. And the running joke that I always have is BMWs look really good on my lift, right? And it's not something I ever really want to touch. Hell, even that Volkswagen I just showed you that lug stud on, that thing, you know, just to work on some of this stuff, I got approximately $50,000 worth of tools in this toolbox. That's retail price, but it's absolutely ridiculous. Even with all of these nice tools that I accumulated over 8 years at the dealership, it isn't always enough to work on some of these things. Well, he brought the car over and he blew a pulley, so we ended up having to change the belt. You can see it just ate half the belt off of his car, and just how these things are designed is absolutely ridiculous. So when I went to put the new idler on, we put both new belts on just because we were in there, and obviously we needed one. When you get the belts off of this particular model of BMW, when the tensioner is here, the idler is here, when there's no belt on, they're actually touching each other. So you go tell me how you'd figure out how to get the belt on there. It was a complete pain in the butt, you know. I've done harder things, but it's just those little annoyances like that. It's like, why would you design this so that it's harder for me to, you know, I mean, I guess I wouldn't have a job, so I shouldn't complain too much, but that's the first thing on my list is going to be Lucian's BMW belt. You know, it just kind of, I don't know, rode the struggle bus there a little bit. So let's move on to the next thing. All right, so the next thing on my list was actually in our last video, and that is going to be this piece of a spring bucket off of Orville's New Edge Mustang, which is actually out in the parking lot right now. So we installed the Scotty D angle kit on his car, and this is the spring bucket for the factory suspension. And you cut this out because when you put that new control arm in and all the Heim joints, you need to make clearance for the wheel to turn farther into the wheel well. So this was a lot of fun. Surprisingly enough, I started out with my Milwaukee angle grinder, M18, and what ended up working better was the M12 hacksaw, which I thought would struggle a lot, but really I found out, like, using a quality blade, and I actually got a lot cleaner cuts. I don't know how well you can see that, but I got really clean cuts out of the Milwaukee hacksaw, and took a little bit of time. Especially up and through this double-edged piece of steel, wasn't much fun. There's not a lot of room to work in there, but you know, I'll keep this around for a while. Just kind of a nice little pleasant memory, even though we had a few sleepless nights and we rode the struggle bus. Next one on my list. Okay, I get pissed at this just looking at it. So tell me what that is. That is a coolant temp sensor, right? Yeah, coolant temp sensor. So remember that Pontiac Vibe that we put a new transmission and a new motor in? So that thing ended up being a disaster. You know, we got it done. I actually saw the customer driving down the road, waved at him not too long ago, about a week ago. But we ended up having that whole project just turned into a nightmare. We ended up having to wait for seals that were specific to that car. And if you've ever worked on any of these crossover rebranded cars, the Pontiac Vibe is the exact same thing as a Toyota Matrix, right? Just rebranded for General Motors. The VINs are brand specific. So you go try to get a part, let's say I talked to my old parts manager at Toyota, you go talk to him, that VIN is useless because it's a Pontiac VIN number. So to go and get the right parts from Toyota, because the seals inside are Toyota, it's the same as a Matrix, that doesn't really work. So you have to go, it was just a mess. Ended up chasing around to a bunch of different dealers, waiting for parts, got everything done, and then the motor that my customer provided for me was actually a remanufactured engine from a JDM motor company. So basically, these motors are over in Japan, they get worn out, or whatever their government says, can't run them anymore. People ship them over here, rebuild them, and then they sell them to people like me. Well, this company, I believe it was Engine World. I'm gonna put you guys on blast because I would never, ever, ever recommend buying a motor from Engine World. And maybe I just had a bad experience, but from what I saw, and there's a little tag, cover your ass tag that they send with it. It says, oh yeah, make sure you go through everything, make sure you replace all the seals, crank seal, all that kind of garbage. And it's like, why should I do that if you're selling me a remanufactured motor? In reality, oh, I'll show you. You know what it looks like? Okay, that was stupid. Dumb idea, but that is exactly what it looked like they did. It looked like they just took a bunch of rattle cans and slopped it all over the car and then said, yep, it's rebuilt. So anyway, that wasn't really the entire problem. I found a cam gear actuator busted off inside the motor. When I went to pull it out, of course, it's aluminum, non-magnetic. It fell into the timing cover, so I had to take all that apart, get that thing out of there. But what really threw me through a loop is I get everything back together on the car and I have one extra connector. Like, where does this go? And it didn't fit anything. It didn't fit anything at all. And I'm like, something is wrong here because the car won't start, it won't idle, and it was just that one connector. Well, this is a JDM coolant temp sensor. See how it's triangle shaped? The one on the car was square shaped. So, exact same sensor on this end, but this end, the plug-in was different. So what I ended up having to do, this was buried underneath vacuum lines and even worse, coolant lines down below the throttle body on the side of the cylinder head. And I had to take it all apart to swap this out because obviously with a different connector for a JDM car, not gonna work. So I keep this one around to remind me to check the stupid things. We got 3 more. So the next one is going to be the 5/8 snap-on spark plug socket. So if you work on any Toyotas, you're at a dealership, or you just end up working on a lot of them, the 5/8 snap-on brand, I don't know why, but the snap-on brand spark plug socket is the exact same size, just a little bit smaller than the spark plug hole on Toyotas. So you grind it down a little bit because here's what happened. I spent about 2 hours taking this socket back out of a spark plug hole. I went and bought one from Mac, and don't get me wrong, I like Snap-on, but something about the 5/8 socket on a Toyota does not compute. So one of the other techs in the shop told me, yeah, I just ground mine down a little bit. So that's what I did to mine. Well then, about a year later, I don't know if it's gonna pick it up, it cracked. And the exact same thing happened again. So if you're working on Toyotas, make sure you do not use a 5/8 snap-on spark plug socket. No bueno. This next one right here is just kind of a funny story. So you see this is a wire stripper that I made. Basically, you put the wire in there, you back the screw up, you put it down, you pull it through, and I made this because for a while, when I was at the Toyota dealership, when I was first out of tech school, they put me on a shift doing brakes and flushes, so like C-Tech stuff. They put me on a shift from 11 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. Absolutely terrible, because the parts department closed at 6. So from 6 to 8, I basically sat there with my thumb up my ass, just like with nothing to do. So I would go over to the AstroStart guys, they'd give me all their wire, and I'd strip it out, right? And at the time I was hourly, so it wasn't like the worst thing in the world, but I also wasn't making that much money, and I wasn't getting any of the flush incentives or any of that spiff money, any of that stuff, because I had 2 hours where I couldn't get any parts. So this I keep in my box just because it's kind of a funny laugh, but I spent a lot of time stripping wires when I was on the stupid 11 to 8 shift at Toyota. The last one on my list, if you deal with any hybrid rebuilds or batteries or anything like that, is going to be this little balance charger from Amazon. So if you saw the video about 2-3 months ago, I went and picked this little guy up, and I had a customer that had a Toyota Prius, a first-gen Prius, like the one Brian drives in Family Guy. And I've hardly ever dealt with first-gen Priuses at all, so it was kind of cool to see it in the shop. And they had a bunch of battery codes. The red triangle of death came up on the dash. Well, you go to the dealership, and they have to sell you, from Toyota, you can only get the whole battery. You can't get the individual cells. Let me grab one and show you what it looks like. All right, so here are Prius battery cells. You can see right there is the connector, on this end's the connector, and you have, I believe this one had 38 or 39 cells, and they go together like this, and like this, and like this, and then you connect with a bus bar, and that's where the dangerous amperage and voltage comes from, is when these are all connected. Imagine 39 of these all connected together. So a lot of amps, everything else. So what ends up happening with these things is one of these individual cells typically will go bad, and when you go to buy them, they sell them in cell blocks. So a block would be 2 cells. So as we said, what normally happens is one of these individual cells will go bad, and then from Toyota, you got to get the entire battery. You can't just buy these individual cells. Well, they sell them as cell blocks, and the very important part is these cells have to be within, I believe it's 0.03 volts within spec of each other, or you'll get codes for battery performance, and that red triangle of death will come on. So how do you fix that? Well, you can go buy these cells on Amazon, on eBay, anything like that, for about $35 a piece, something like that. And you can actually revive these old ones, but why would you buy junk ones unless you're in the business of professionally reconditioning these things to resell or building rebuilt batteries? Why else would you do it? So you buy ones that check out good, you look up the spec on what this cell is supposed to be at, and then this little balance charger here, I think this was $40 on Amazon, something like that. I had to go buy leads for it. It didn't include the ones I needed. And you hook them up to the ends where you would connect the cells together, and you discharge them and charge them with this little battery charger. And it's like watching paint dry. It takes a long time, but eventually, and I would recommend checking every single cell in your battery that you're rebuilding, you get all of these in sync, in spec of each other, and it's a process. You can see I got them labeled and numbered, and the voltage is written down, but that little balance charger ended up saving me a ton of time, made me a lot of money, and saved my customer a lot of money. All right, guys, so that is that episode of Mechanic Stories, Mechanics Trophies, whatever you want to call this little video series. I enjoy doing these. If there's other things you guys would like to see in relation to some of this stuff, let me know down in the comments. As always, you guys, thanks for watching, and we are so close to our 2,000 subscribers. The Milwaukee Tool's ready to do the giveaway, so as soon as we hit 2,000, I'll pick someone from the subscribers down in the comments, and I will send that to you. So let's get to 2,000, you guys. I really, really appreciate it. The new shop is coming along really nicely, and we'll see you very soon.